All right, so here we go. So this is going to be part 2 of this reading, this close reading of Sasha's article on Deep Okayness. Yesterday, I started it, and I went for 40 minutes, and I didn't even get past this paragraph here. So I'm okay with that personally. I kind of like reading this way. I like reading this closely, so I'm not going to try to rush through it or do it any differently this time. It just means that I have to get ready for quite a ride, because look how long this article is. Whoa, my gosh. But yeah. Alright, so I just skimmed, before hitting record, I just skimmed what I read yesterday, and so let's just start where I left off. It's cool, because as far as I know, Sasha is not a copywriter. I mean, in the sense of marketing and sales. And the reason I'm saying that is because I'm just looking at, his paragraph length. And in most copywriting, this is kind of unheard of. It's super rare to ever see paragraphs of this length, let alone this length. Something like this is much more common. And I don't mean to say that that's a good thing or bad thing, but it is how a lot of copywriters are trained. Sorry, just wanted to check that it's still recording. But it's nice to, have some thick paragraphs. THICC paragraphs. It makes more of a rhythm, and I like the variations, like thick paragraph, thicker paragraph, and then boom, short point. It's sort of rhythmic in that sense. And I'm in skimming what I read yesterday, I was noticing some of the rhythm that I didn't catch last time, just like this part. It's the sense that while I might fuck up, my basic worth is beyond question. I have no essential damage. I am not polluted. I am fine. It's like very rhythmic. I love it. I know I'm not talking about the ideas at all, but I think I'm going to be going back and forth in these videos of just kind of looking at the writing itself and then also the ideas. So, all right, we're back in... oh my gosh, that's some thick paragraph. Oof, fatty. All right, so let's see. Here we are. I'm reading this right now. So here we go with this paragraph. It's kind of connecting, or it's not connecting, but like it's an offshoot of this part of the headline, which I talked about in the last video, and like why have a clause like this, and what's the effect of it on me as a reader, and in a certain sense, I don't recall if I use this word, but by putting this in here, it turns it into a manifesto of sorts, right? Whereas if it was only this, it would be a story about himself, which is also interesting and worth reading, right? So it's like, it's a how-to piece in that sense, wrapped in a story, or how to delivered as story in the sense. But this makes it not about him anymore, right? This makes it a manifesto. This makes it a yeah, like I said before, it's like it speaks to it's like a points to his relationship to the universe, in a sense. Like, I demand that everyone can have this. And I'm just trying to think about and articulate the import of that, the importance and the effect of including this kind of idea in the article. Like, why not just have a story and a how-to piece, right? What changes by adding this? And I was talking to a friend of mine the other day about how with music, sometimes you get these songs which may be very personal, from the artist talking about their own experience, but the way in which the song is written, the way in which the lyrics are written and the music, it transforms it from being just a personal story to something that other people can kind of latch onto and almost, sing along to, as if it's vocalizing something for them. Right? It's not just the artist's story. It becomes something that expresses the thoughts and feelings of the listener as well. And I think there's a way in which this is what is happening with this line here. It makes it something that, as a reader, I can grab onto, and I don't know, it makes it about me in a certain way. I feel like as I go, or tomorrow in another video, it'll be much clearer in my head to be able to articulate what I'm trying to say, but I'll leave it at that, because otherwise I'm never going to get anywhere. But yeah, so yeah, this paragraph, it's coming out of that clause in the headline, right? It's not really about him. It's about the state of things. It's about all of us. So he compares his experience with what happens in a therapist's office. And he hasn't said anything at this point bad about therapy, but he does right here, right? I mean, it hints, again, he's very good at kind of like leading you into the next sentence, like foreshadowing or hinting or just making you curious. So suddenly we're comparing his experience to therapy. And that's particularly poignant. That's not the right word, but whatever. Relevant, like right now, because coming out of COVID, coming out of lockdown, quarantine, for the past 2 years, mental health was already a big issue, but it gained so much steam during these past 2 years. And I don't need to talk about why that is. I think it's pretty clear. But it's so much more on everyone's minds. nowadays. Therapy, right? All these new apps and startups that are focusing on mental health, and so in a way he's like calling that out. It's like there's this thing that everyone's talking about, and everyone's talking about as if it's a really good thing, but he's suggesting possibly that there's something wrong with it, and that gets you curious, right? So it's nothing to do with what normally happens, and that is of concern to me. Deep okayness should be commonplace. What a simple but powerful sentence. And then even more grand, sort of, like, we ought. Yeah, I mean, it's very much like the demand here. We ought to do this, right? I mean, for one thing, like, who's we? We as a society. It's inclusive, that's for sure, right? He's not just saying, I think this should be possible for as many people as possible, but it's by saying we here, he makes us on the same team. He might mean a much bigger group of people than just me, the reader, and him, the writer. But as the reader right now, it makes me feel like it's me and him, you know? We ought to make this possible for as many people as possible. That simply will not do. It's like very, like a proclamation. It's like, this is the state of the world, and it's not okay. I'm not okay with it. We have to do better. This here is it's a bold. It's not that bold, I guess, but it's spelling it out for us that, like, this is not a trivial thing. Like, if everyone had this, it would be a massive change. But then, this sentence, using this analogy, basically, just really hammers it home. I mean, I don't even know the details so much about penicillin, but I know, just having heard it talked about so much. Man, I feel like what I just said made me sound like such an idiot, but whatever. Like, the wide availability of penicillin is like one of those things that you just hear about your whole life as like one of the fucking greatest, greatest achievements of the 20th century. Maybe that's a little bold of me to say, but massively impactful for humanity. That's what I'm trying to say, right? So he gives you a comparison to be like, this would, like, save so many lives, right? And that's also the sort of the import of this. It's like life-saving. It's not, obviously, yeah, we're talking about health, so it's a relevant analogy or metaphor, but it's not like it would be like the invention of the wheel, which made life better and allowed us to progress. No, it's this thing that we came up with that literally saved people's lives. It's not a nice to have. Okay, moving on, finally. I really like this sentence, just the casualness of it. You're fine. Life sucks, but whatever. This writing is so dynamic. You have things like these bold claims, He's not saying I think this, he's just saying it. He's not hedging at all, But then he does, he's like, okay, well, here's my understanding. And then it becomes very conversational. And then even like internet speak. Yeah, this is really cool just from a writing point of view. I guess I'm not really talking about the idea right now because I basically agree. It's not like a new idea to me yet, or something that I disagree with. What's standing out to me is just how bold Sasha is so far in his writing, which I really admire, because I tend to not be very bold. I hedge a lot. Coming out with just saying this, just like boom, it's in your face, You have to be confident to say that, especially as someone who, I think, admittedly, on his part, he's not an expert in this stuff, but he has the confidence to say this sort of proclamation about the state of things. Yeah, I admire that a lot. Again, this is also very bold. It's like, no, I'm not an expert, but I've had some success with this. I think things are fucked up, and I have a proposition for how to change it. That's fucking bold. Good for him. I agree. It's amazing that he has turned the word okay into a proper noun, or like his own concept. Capital O, okay. This is also a very bold thing to say, right? It is our birthright. It would be very easy to push back and be like, says who? Or, right? Or like, according to what? Prove that. To say it is your birthright is like, I mean, you're making a statement about what it means to be a human being. I'm not saying I disagree, but I'm just saying that that's bold. If you put this transcript of this video in a word cloud, the most common word from this video might be bold. Psychotechnologies. Yeah, IFS is really big now. I want to say link to Medium article. I'm not going to click it, but I wonder if it's his. Seekers of happiness. I guess to double back to this paragraph, I'm a little confused because he introduced this idea. He was so clear and bold in this paragraph and then this statement, but then when it comes to explaining, I don't know, the paradigm that he's introducing here just doesn't hit me as like, oh, whoa, that's totally different. I mean, I guess so. If I look back, I guess it makes sense, but on first impression, it doesn't feel radically different. Whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's the difference between just assuming that, like, you kind of just maintain and you just, what was it, triage? How do you say that word? Triage? That sounds right. You just sort of put out the fires, in a sense, of your mental health for the rest of your life, but not, like, ever become super happy or anything like that. So yeah, it's pretty different. Just the way that it's written doesn't feel as much of a smack in the face as I'm kind of coming to expect from these, like, 5 paragraphs that I've read from him. I'm also just recalling that I don't think he yet has talked about what path he followed, right? Like, he mentions IFS here, talks about hallucinogens, meditation, therapy. The only thing he said about himself is that he didn't do it via traditional talk therapy. So I'm curious when and how he will introduce his own path. I think I've heard or seen him talk about that book, Existential Kink. Maybe I'm thinking of somebody else, but yeah, my understanding is that was kind of like the book, and then some particular exercise in that book that really gave him some profound shift that set him off on this path of writing about this topic, I think. I love that. The different monsters that people tend to encounter in their own self-loathing dungeons. What a great metaphor and image. I mean, if we're being super nitpicky, I'm not a fan of this metaphor, in the sense, especially with this word here, and considering that he mentioned IFS up here, which is probably the best example of my preferred method to slay these things, is really not how you go about it. I mean, my fucking Twitter handle is called Damon. I rarely say it out loud. Damon Hugger. That's how I say it. Damon Hugger. Which is like a play on Demon Hugger. I'm not a fan of the idea of killing these demons. I think they should be loved. But, whatever. Monstrous manual. That's fun. Or just makes me think of Monsters, Inc. And the fact that it makes me think of Monsters, Inc., there's very little here that would make me think that he's trying to make me think of Monsters, Inc. But for me, since I am, it makes this whole thing so much more like playful and less intimidating. No less, I don't mean to say that it's not serious, but it just makes it a little more approachable, you know? Like, the Monsters, Inc. is about monsters. Scary monsters. But there's also a way in which the monsters in Monsters, Inc. are extremely cute and cuddly, and like, yeah, they're scary and they're in the closet, but they're also cuddly. So, yeah. He's not really putting that out there, but that's what's going on in my head. It's also interesting that he has yet to tell us his story, except like in a one paragraph form. But what he is doing is saying like how we as a collective, whether that means as a country or as the world or just as the sort of Twitter space, whatever, he's like talking about how all of us can like go about working together to improve the state of mental health practice. I don't know what to make of that. It's just really interesting to me that he's starting off with this. A better world of mental health might start with a lot of good, but like, my expectation would have been that this sort of thing would come at the end, after telling us his story. So, just making a note of that. Maybe it'll make more sense as I go. Maybe I don't know. Wow. And then to say, maybe this approach is not the right one. Unacceptable. Yeah. Coming back to my word bold, it's just, he's just so clearly taking a stand, you know? Again, I'm repeating myself, I know, but it's not just his story. It's not just some pieces of advice for the casual reader. He's taking a stand. He's making I was gonna say political statement. I'll back away from that, but yeah, he's seriously planting his flag, The current state of mental health knowledge is absolutely unacceptable. You have to be confident as a motherfucker to say something like that, especially as a non-expert. And again, I admire him for this. Maybe it just points to sort of a difference in how he difference between how he and I think about these sorts of topics, because this is a topic that I pretty much think about every single day for most of the day, but I don't think about it in these grand societal kind of ways that would lead me to make statements like this. Or maybe I'm just not confident enough. I don't know. If I think about the things that I want to write, as much as this article so far is really awesome, I don't know that this is the sort of thing that I personally want to write. I don't know that I want to be making these kinds of proclamations. Which is fine, Different people work in different ways and have different priorities and play different parts in this overall scheme, I also wonder who is the intended audience for this. That's just an open question that I'll keep in the back of my mind as I read. I don't really understand this sentence. What does that mean? That they aren't impressive in their standard presentation? And how does that connect to being fine as a first step but not transformative? That's not entirely clear to me, but yeah, this is true. I pretty much I say to so many of my friends, therapy is not therapy is not therapy. Having dived into that world as much as I have, it's you can go to therapy, or I could go to therapy and you could go to therapy with two different therapists, and the approaches can be almost contradictory. The world of mental health is far from homogeneous in its paradigms and goals and strategies. So to think that merely going to therapy is doing is going to get the job done is not correct. Or, I mean, it's good, do it, but there's more. There's a lot more nuance. But most people don't realize that. You know? Probably, yeah, the people that I know, the people that I've talked to, I don't think any of them have been particularly impressed with the therapy that they've done. A lot of them are pretty underwhelmed by their therapists, but they keep going. And honestly, I don't know that they get a lot of value from it, but because of this, this kind of overarching paradigm that, like, just go to therapy and that's what it's about. That's it. That's the end of the story. People don't realize, like, that it can be a lot better. Like, mindfulness, I mean, I guess you didn't say meditation, but I was going to say, like, meditation can actually fuck you up. It can overwhelm you and lead you to be way less happy. It can make you full of fucking all your anxieties, and all that shit comes up to the surface because you're finally paying attention. It's not like a panacea at all, which is how it's presented in the marketing of things like Headspace and Calm and all of those meditation apps. It's just like, do it for 5 minutes a day and you'll feel bliss. But, like, actually, that's not necessarily what happens. I think I'm going to read this paragraph and then I'll wrap up this session. Interesting. Seem to. He's so bold, but then why say seem to? That's a very tentative statement. Why not just say that they do? Why be so confident earlier and so unconfident in this bit? I know that this is not like ridiculously huge thing. It would be easy to ignore it, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but Sasha's a good writer and I think he's very intentional, so I'm gonna notice these things. We can't just give up and say that we do this thing called mental health, which is less effective than religions that are thousands of years old. Surely we can synthesize the best knowledge and come up with new levels of understanding. Again, it's that sort of proclamation, manifesto type of language. It's like, surely we can do better. Come on, you guys. This is so fucked up. There are other people doing this well. Why can't we figure this out? It's not, the language itself is not pleading, but it is a sort of plea. Yeah, okay. I'm going to end it here, so let me just see how where I'm at. All right. So I'll just keep this page here and come back to it the next time. Cool. Later.